Hi there, I'm Will. I'm going to be pitching today the Wild Country Zephyros 1 compact tent. So yeah, when I'm looking around for a spot to pitch my tent, I try to find one as flat as possible. Inevitably, when you're out in the hills, that's never always going to be the case. So it's probably finding one that's the shallowest of a spot. And then also, then you take into consideration where your head is going to be in the tent. So ideally you want to have your head uphill, not downhill. Otherwise you might be waking up a little bit dizzy in the morning or find yourself sliding backwards. So I tend to try and make sure my head's uphill, but then also take into consideration any kind of wind direction. So what you don't want to do is have the broad side of the tent facing the wind, because then there's more for the wind to catch and it will mean you'll have a buffeting night inside the tent. But yeah, we'll start off, get this out. What I tend to try and do first is locate the poles and the pegs and have them close to hand. So yeah, I'll usually pop the pegs into my pocket, so then it's easier to grab them out as I'm walking about and pegging it down. What's helpful is that Wild Country, you've already got the inner pitch to the outer, so it means that you can pitch it all in one go, straight out of the bag. But I'd always recommend, before taking it out on the hill, always with a brand new tent, get it out in the garden or in the living room, just so that you're more familiar with it in terms of pitching it. Also, so that you've got a chance to attach the inner if the inner isn't attached. And then also so that you can pack it away so that it's familiar to you for the next time you need it. So personally, I actually like the pegs, the pole and the tent to be separate from one another, but others might like to keep them all together. So yeah, it's always best to have a dry run at home first. So with a tent like this, which has got a single hoop, so it's basically like a tunnel tent, I would start off with pegging out the corners of one end first. So these tabs here, loosen them up. Roughly pick a corner there. So again, tent peg going at 45-degree angle. Again, sort of loosen them off. It's always easier to pitch a tent when you've got all the straps loosened off. Kind of get it to a point there where you've got a nice straight line. And then afterwards, go ahead and insert the pole. So again, very useful. The poles are color-coded, so it's nice and easy to identify which is which. So you've got the two end poles, which are the two red poles there. We can pop them to one side for now. And then you've got the main pole, which is the blue pole, goes through the blue sleeve. And you've also got a little repair sleeve as well. So that little sleeve, if you've got a section of pole that's broken, you can just thread that on to where you've got the damage and then tape it in place, and then that's a nice little temporary fix to see you through for the rest of the trip before you can then replace a section if you need to. Usually what people tend to do is kind of let these poles seat themselves, but it's never always recommended, just because that over time the sections can start creating sharp points on the edges of them. So it's always best to help them seat themselves in, then that way there's less chance of damaging the pole, which might then lead to potential failures along the way. Then let's just pop through the sleeve. Get it seated on the other end. So on this tent you've got two grommets. Always best to start off with the outer grommet first, just so it keeps it nice and loose, and then once it's pitched you can then tighten it up onto the second grommet, and you've got the same on this end as well. So just pop it there for now, keeps it nice and loose, and then once you've got the pole in, you can let it drop down, but then grab the other end and then you pull it out. And then finally, it's the end poles to go in. So these poles seat into these little pockets here. Make sure that's seated nicely. And then put it into there. You've got a vent on this end, helps with the breathability of the tent. And you've got your guy line. And so let's get another peg. So with this pole, what you want to try and do is make sure that you've got tension running across the inner to the grommet to then this bottom section of the guy line, and then you can tension that up, and you can see here it'll start to pull on the tent, create some tension on the fly sheet there on that end. What you don't want, you want the poles facing outwards towards this direction. You don't want them so that it's facing inwards, because otherwise you don't want it facing that way, because otherwise you'll get some sag in the tent. So that's why you want the poles facing slightly outwards, so then it's pulling on the fly, making it nice and taut there. Same again on this side. Go. Take out some of these creases. You can even relook at locating some of the tent pegs if you wanted to. And if you wanted to increase the tension, then you can just get it into the second one there. That just adds a little bit more taut, makes it a bit more taut on the pole. And then get the guy lines out. You want these at a 45-degree angle. These are reflective high-vis guy lines as well, so they should be pretty visible to reduce the chances of tripping over them. And you want these in the direction of the wind. So if you were to get a wind that hits the side of the tent, then this will take some of that pressure off of the pole. Again, just tighten it up. So when packing the tent away, always start with the guy lines first. So take out the pegs and then try to roll away the guy lines nice and neat so that they're ready for the next time I need them. So I just tend to do a loose knot, nothing too fancy or special, just to keep it nice and tidy. Start off with the edges first. If you need some help getting the pegs out, then it's always good to use the other tent peg like that. Just helps you get a little bit more leverage. Now, as I'm going along, I'll just be popping them away into the little pouch. In this case, I'm just going to keep these loose, just because they're not that long, and what you don't want to do is end up getting confused with the knot, which is useful for you to pop the peg through. So I'll just leave that loose. But whilst I'm here, I'll take out the end strap pole and pop that away into its bag. Then next, I'll take down the main pole. And it's always best practice to push through the tent pole rather than pull on them. Reduces the chance of you causing any damage by pulling out a section. So push that out and just push it through the sleeve, pull the sleeve through. what you tend to find is that if you try to pull out a pole, you'll pull a section and then you run the risk of breaking the bungee inside, which you don't want to do. So I try to make the tent as square as possible, or as rectangular as possible. So with this, because it's got a little bit of a vestibule, I'll tend to fold that in just to tidy it up a little bit. Like that. And then on a windy day like today, what I'd have is that I would fold one end into thirds with the other end still pegged down, or you can have it weighed down with your pack as well, just to stop it from blowing away. Want to try and bunch it up nice and neat, because the neater it's rolled away, the easier it will be to get it back in the bag. So at this point, it's all personal preference really as to whether you want to roll it away with the poles inside, or whether you just want to roll it away on its own and keep the poles separate. With these, because the poles are so small and the pack size is so short, you can fold it all into one. So that's all of the pegs now packed away, so they can go in there as well, so you've got it all in one place. And having them all in the middle just helps with the rolling as well. Gives you a little bit more purchase to keep it nice and tidy. So as I'm going along and start rolling, try to keep it as tight as possible, and at the same time try to sort of wipe off any blades of grass or any little bugs, so it keeps it nice and tidy. And then also just tidying up the fold as I go to again just keep it nice and neat. Rather than dragging the tent towards me, especially you don't want to be doing that anyways, but especially on drier ground where there's a chance of it catching a rock or a sharp edge, you don't want to then pull your tent towards you and potentially cause a tear. It's always best to just roll with it. That's nice and tight, and you've got a nice wide opening in the stuff pack you can just lay this into. Pop the cover over the top and then cinch down on the cordage. And you've also got some handy little compression straps as well. So you can compress it down nice and small. And that's the Zephyros Compact one from Wild Country.